Welcome, everyone. My name is Jennifer Parrish Taylor. I want to welcome you to the Urban League for All of Us community event. We will get started in 1 minute. We're excited to have you and have a great conversation. Again, we'll get started in 1 minute. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Urban Leaguers, friends, community members. It's great to have you here with us this evening. I am Nikenge Harmon Johnson, and I'm the Chief Executive and President of the Urban League of Portland. For more than 75 years, the Urban League has served all of Oregon and Southwest Washington with our diverse mix of powerful advocacy and consistent services and programming for the people who need our services most. We are champions of social justice and civil rights. We are also all about the business of the people of the region that we serve, which certainly focuses on African Americans and others to help them thrive in the areas of housing, education, employment, and health. We truly believe that this region is one in which we all may thrive, and in order to make it live up to its awesome opportunities and prospects, we do this work day after day, week after week, decade after decade. And very often we are lucky enough to do this work with our partners. You'll get to meet some of our partners, some of our friends this evening, including Jackie Leung from the Micronesian Islander community. And you'll get to meet Ms. Reina Lopez, who is another of my co-hosts this evening from PICUN, the Farm Workers Union in our state. I will introduce both of them later, and I'm really excited that you'll also get to meet a couple of luminaries from the community in Marion County, from my hometown of Salem, Oregon. We wanted to take this time not just to talk with you rather, about these important issues of migration and climate change and the impact that they have on our day-to-day lives, impacts that we often probably don't think about, but maybe we are a little bit more often given some of the things we've experienced lately in the Mid-Willamette Valley. But we also wanted to use the opportunity to highlight a couple of our community leaders who I hope many of you already know, but for those of you who don't, it's going to be a great opportunity to hear more about some great impactful organizations in the Mid-Valley and their work they're doing every day to help make the lives of our community members, of our youth, of families better. So I look forward to that. I look forward to making some introductions and to celebrating those folks in our community. Beyond that, please note that we have a chance to exchange ideas. This evening is a town hall. And we had hoped very much that we would be with you in person, that we'd be gathering somewhere in Salem where we could be, elbow to elbow and side by side. When we first started planning these town halls, nearly a year ago now. But the pandemic has different ideas. COVID is not over. It is not over. And we are resilient and we are ready to continue to do what we need to do to keep each other safe and to protect our own health. That's why we decided to keep this event virtual tonight. But even in so doing, we wanted to make sure that we have a chance to exchange some ideas and to take some questions and hear some thoughts from our audience members. So you can expect that we're going to do that in two different ways. One, Soon you will see a poll question. And I know some of you are with us via Facebook, others of you are with us via YouTube. Regardless of the platform that you're streaming this evening for tonight's Urban League All of Us Town Hall, you'll be able to participate in our poll question. It's going to appear in the Facebook format soon. It will also appear on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to use the chat to provide your answer to the poll. Over on YouTube, I think it's a little bit, or over on Facebook, I think you can just click a button with one of your answers to the multiple choice questions. And then our teams working behind the scenes, they'll take that feedback, they'll do a little number crunching, and they'll be able to report out the results to us later during tonight's town hall. That's one of the ways that we hope to interact with you, so please don't be shy. The other way is that we're going to do some Q&A. Same thing, you'll be able to interact via the Facebook chat, and you could also use the YouTube chat portion to share with us your thoughts and ask questions. And we'll take as many questions as we can when we get to that portion of the program. Before I move on to introduce our guests and get us really going in the discussion, I want to tell you that we are going to be mindful of your time this evening because we are very, very grateful to be brought into your homes, your offices, on your mobile devices, perhaps as you're in your car, wherever you are. We're really happy to have this chance to be with you, and we're grateful to you for making this time to be with us this evening, especially as we discuss these important topics. Let me tell you first about the Urban League for All of Us series of community conversations. We set out, well, about more than a year ago at the Urban League and said, we really want to make sure that we're connecting with more of the folks in the Urban League's footprint. Certainly our name is the Urban League of Portland, and it's one we're very proud of. Given the demographics of our state and the size of the Portland community, that's our name and it has been forever, but it's our legacy, our roots are spread throughout this state. And we want to do a better job of connecting with people who are all across our state. So that's the genesis of this idea. Beyond that, we want to make sure that we're talking about really important and big topics in ways that are accessible and consumable to us on a day-to-day basis. So we decided to make things easy on ourselves, and we chose migration and climate change because that's really easy, right? No, of course it's not. These are two challenging topics. And when we talked about migration and climate change, even amongst my own staff, and I'll talk with Jackie and Raina about this soon, I was asking folks, how do these topics relate to your everyday life? And the first answers were broad, and they had to do sort of with global politics and population movement. It took a little bit longer for people on our team, including me, frankly, in one case, to talk about, well, how does climate change really impact me on a day-to-day basis? Well, that's why we chose these topics, because for some of us, I think it's particularly important that we understand these big ideas, these big issues, these big challenges, how they relate to our day-to-day life. And perhaps that will make us feel a little bit more earnest about talking to our legislators, our local policymakers, and backing policy change that needs to happen in order for not only ourselves and our families to have the kind of futures that we envision, but frankly, for all citizens of the world to exist for decades and centuries upon centuries to come, if we play our cards right. Making these issues relevant to us right now is probably the way to go. So we'll get into that a little bit more as we go along. I also want to note we're going to do more of these town halls. So we want your feedback now, but we're also really happy to accept your feedback later if you want to email us or be in touch with us via social media. The Urban League is at ULPDX on Twitter. That's at ULPDX. That's the same thing on the gram. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube as well, and we'll do the best we can to collect your thoughts and your ideas so that we can make these town halls even more interesting and engaging going forward, because this is a conversation for all of us, and we want to make sure that we're actually representing what it is that you would like to hear and to see. Going forward, you can expect us in the Gorge. You can expect to see us in Hood River. We've got a town hall scheduled out that way. We'll be down in Southern Oregon. I think we've settled upon Ashland, but we'll certainly be visiting Medford when we're bringing the town hall there. And you'll see us down in the Lower Valley. We'll be down in the Eugene Springfield area too. And then, believe it or not, we're going to head on over to Eastern Oregon, one of my favorite areas to visit, to focus on African American heritage in Oregon, in the Eastern Oregon part of the state, and to host another town hall in that area. More dates, more information to come, but we wanted to tee you up to let you know that if you enjoyed this conversation and would like to hear more, you'll have plenty of opportunity to engage going further. And even if the conversation is taking place in a county that you don't live in, it doesn't matter because we're doing them virtually. So please feel free to join us, and don't feel funny about the fact that the focus will be a community that might be different than your own, because we truly believe that Oregon is for all of us. And this is one of the ways that we demonstrate that. So thanks again for being here. And I want to do this in advance. Thank you to my team for all of your hard work to put this together. This format is a first for us, so we're learning things. And I appreciate your efforts to learn along with me so that we can better serve all the folks in our community. Okie dokie. Now is my chance to introduce our guest this evening. I am going to start with Ms. Jackie Leung. Jackie is, yeah, I think I'm going to call you Jackie. I'll call you Raina this evening. Or Ms. Kinga. I'm so tempted to just, oh, it's Ms. Leung. Oh, it's Ms. Raina, Ms. Lopez. But these are my sisters, so we'll go with first names this evening, y'all. Jackie is the executive director of the Micronesian Islander community, and she's also a community health worker with the organization. Jackie is a Salem City Councilwoman. She's a powerhouse and someone who I've been lucky enough to know for a few years now. And I bump into her work more often than I bump into her. What I mean by that is she's all over the place and has got a super big brain who engages that brain for community day after day and week after week. So I'm lucky enough to see her work, but also to feel its impacts, even when I don't get to spend enough time with her, because she's a very busy woman, a mom, a wife. She's also a student pursuing yet another degree. She has a JD from Willamette University, and she's pursuing her PhD in an effort to further the health and wellness of her community. Jackie has a lot of experience advocating for domestic violence survivors, work that is really near and dear to her heart. She also has a lot of experience examining legislative issues that impact the Asian and Pacific Islander community and expressing what it is that the community needs, and also working with other community members in order to create the kinds of coalitions that are necessary for us all to win. So I'm really glad to have Jackie here with us this evening. Jackie, thanks for being here. Will you wave to everybody, say hi? Thanks, Jackie. I also want to introduce my sister, Raina Lopez. Ms. Raina Lopez is the executive director of PICUN, the Farm Workers Union in our state. I am fortunate enough to be a supporting member of PICUN, and I'm always very impressed with the work they do on behalf of the communities they serve, and frankly, on behalf of all Oregonians, to make us safer, to make us healthier, and to make us live up to the promise of what Oregon is for workers, for families, certainly for women and for children. And that's in no small part because of Raina's leadership. For more than a decade, she has been vocal for her community on legislative issues and policy issues. She's a community organizer to the bone. And I'm lucky enough that both of my colleagues here this evening certainly are excellent community organizers. Raina was raised in Oregon after her family, her parents are proud immigrants, Mexican immigrants who moved here, following the path of farm work. She has represented not only her family, but her community very well following her graduation from Willamette University, so another Willamette alum with us today, where she studied political science and sociology. PICUN and the Urban League find ourselves often on the same side of the table when we're advocating for legislative policy in the state legislature, including right now as we push for overtime pay for farm workers. I think we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. But Ms. Raina Lopez is certainly a powerhouse, and she's an advocate for community members par excellence. So Raina, will you say hi and just wave to everybody? Thank you, Raina. That's great. Let me make sure I've got my screen so I can see both of you at the same time. Can I make that happen? Let's see. Be impressed with me. All right. I think that's going to work. I mentioned to you that we'll have the polling question that's coming up soon. Okay, Jennifer, are you? Okay, there you are. Super. I think we'll get started on our discussion for the evening. And Jennifer, will you kick us off?
Absolutely. My name is Jennifer Parrish Taylor, and I'm the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy here at the Urban League. I head up the ACE department, which stands for Advocacy and Civil Engagement, and it works to achieve policy and community change that advances equality, social and economic justice, and civil rights for African Americans and others in Oregon. We work to advance the League's mission of economic empowerment and civil rights through building partnerships and coalitions, advocacy, outreach, community organizing, policy research, and analysis. We're doing all the things in service of our community. And so I'm excited that you could join us tonight. I'll be kicking off the discussion for our panel of hosts by beginning with President Harmon Johnson, followed by Ms. Leong and then Ms. Lopez. And later in the evening, you'll see me again as I facilitate our question and answer portion of the evening, which will include questions from the community, as President Harmon Johnson mentioned. So if you have one, please feel free to drop it in the chat on Facebook and on YouTube, and our team will be sure to send it our way. Your questions can be about any topic, but we hope that it'll be related to the discussion that we're having tonight that's centered on climate change and how it impacts Oregon's residents, no matter where they come from. And so the first question is for President Harmon Johnson, and that is, how are the impacts of climate change borne disproportionately by communities of color, and how is the Urban League working to change that?
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate you. And I warned my staff earlier that I might throw a monkey wrench in some of their plans, and I'm going to start now because that's what makes life interesting. Thank you for the question, Jennifer. And I'm going to answer, but I'm also going to ask Jackie and Raina if they want to chime in on all three of these questions. So let's make it a discussion. If we were at a town hall, we'd be sitting next to each other, having these conversations. So let's get it going a little bit free flowing. Thanks, Jennifer. I appreciate the question. I think so. One of the most difficult things for me as I'm learning more about climate change and the impact that it has on the community every day is really thinking about the impacts on public health, right? So the more that I read, the more galling it is how passive we as a community are about the environmental impacts of climate change and how it impacts our health. For example, Black residents across the country are more than 1.5 times more likely to have asthma than other Americans. We are also more than 4 times as likely to live in communities where the air quality is rated as poor. That's not an accident. And it's as true in Oregon as it is in Illinois. Well, Oregon and Illinois don't have a lot in common. And I like to use that juxtaposition because there are very few things that we would compare Chicago and Portland to. We wouldn't really do it. So why is it that these sad, data points are the same, in both places? It's frankly because of the impacts of discrimination and systemic racism that lead African Americans to live closer to highways, to live closer to polluting factories, to have to raise their families in communities where the very air they breathe is less safe. Beyond that, we don't have to look very far. From Illinois, we can just pop on over to Michigan. And Michigan is just one example. There are plenty of water quality issues in our own state, but most folks know about the water quality in Flint. There's lots of politics that led to it, but people can't drink the water that comes out of their tap in what used to be one of America's greatest manufacturing cities. So it's not for lack of infrastructure. It's not for lack of resources. It's certainly not for lack of population that something better hasn't been done. But if you look at the demographics of the people who live in Flint, they look an awful lot like me. If you look at the further into the economics of the people who live in Flint, the average income is lower than the national average income in the community. And that may be one reason that explains why it's so hard, even after all of these years where it's been a national news story, for change to come to Flint. Those are a couple of impacts. And how is, sort of water quality in Flint related to climate change? I may talk more about that as we go further, because it matters, and it matters to the way that the way people are able to thrive. But taking it back to our own state, when we think about just the disproportionate impacts of air quality on Black folks in Oregon, we know that the air Black folks in Oregon breathe is 40% more polluted than the average. The air that Black Oregonians breathe is 40% more polluted than the average white Oregonian. That is frankly very bizarre to me, especially in a state like this that is so beautiful. When we think of the fact that the air is clear and beautiful. That's what we think of ourselves as having, but the reality is very different for some folks. So for the Urban League's part, Jennifer, one of the things that we've done is to make sure that we have a robust policy team on staff that better understands these issues and is talking to our county commissions and our city councils and engaging with the Department of Transportation on a regular basis to understand the issues and then be the voice at the table on behalf of the communities that we serve, that we are there to call attention to the deficits and the places where there are deficits, and to highlight the opportunities the state has, that the counties have, to make different choices for the health and wellness of the people who live in our communities. I think we'll have a chance to talk more about that as we go, but let me not filibuster. Jackie or Raina, do you want to say, hey, baby, do you want to talk more about just the impacts of the health issues that we see in our community, and just so how our communities are disproportionately bearing the weight of climate change. You pick, Jackie, right now, who wants to go first?
I can
Go
go
for it, Jackie.
first real quick, since I'm holding a really young one who's a little bit cranky at the moment, just woke up from his nap. But that's life that we're in, especially in the time of COVID, like virtual reality. We got kids, who pop in and out, even little fur babies who are time to time, right? It just makes it more exciting.
We love it.
So yeah, so to kind of follow up on your commentary specifically about climate change, I mean, look at the impact, like you gave the example of water, not having access to quality, clean water, for that matter, it affects our mental health. We get dehydration. We also have people who are not able to get access to having a bath on a frequent basis, not even being able to have clean clothes. So because it's affecting them not only personally and physically and emotionally and mentally, all those different things plays a role in our mental health. And adding on that in terms of climate change, thinking about, what kind of space and what kind of environment that we live in. Are we close enough, for example, to green space? So how close are we to get to a park? Are we actually close enough to sidewalks that do we actually have sidewalks on our streets to walk on? Or are we walking on the road with the fear and danger of possibly being run over by drivers who are driving by us? So these are some of the main things that we really need to think about, thinking about climate change, how that affects not only us personally, but our families and our community. And also in general, how it harms us health-wise in the long run.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that, and also want to say that I love the way that we're framing this today, because I feel like this is the way that we connect it to people's day-to-day lives. And I think it makes our conversation so much more different from the traditional environmentalist lens, where we're talking about the fish and the wildlife, and for us to really be able to address the crisis that we're in today around climate, around our environment, we really need to connect it to people's lives. Like, we can't expect to put out like a beautiful report about what's happening in terms of if it's not connecting, right? And so for me, like, really centering BIPOC communities, Black and Indigenous people of color, means that we connected to the things that we're experiencing today. And the reports tell us, in 12 years, we're done, right? We can't turn back. But the reality is, like, our folks have been feeling the effects of climate change, right? They have been experiencing extreme heat. They were run out of their homes, their motherland, and immigrated here because either the land was no longer good for agricultural purposes, like we couldn't grow anything out of it anymore, or some of our islands are completely gone, right? Or and they had to move. And I think that, especially as we're talking about the impacts on BIPOC communities, immigrant communities, frontline communities, there's so many things that we can connect to it today. And even just talking about Salem, one of the big campaigns that we had supported in the past was to bring awareness around Covanta, the incinerator that's right in between Woodburn and Salem, and the impacts that has on our air quality, the particulates that are in the air that our kids, our grandmas, ourselves are breathing every single day, and wondering what kind of connections that has on our long-term health. And that health component and the social determinants of our health are a really important way for us to be able to be heard in this conversation, in a conversation that in the past we had been excluded from by more mainstream environmentalist conversations. And I think this is really a way to connect it to the human component of it, but to what we're living every single day. And that makes this less, oh, well, who knows if this is happening for real. It makes it less like intangible. And for me, that is a crucial part of connecting it to the community organizing.
Brandon, I'm glad you said it that way. It's, we've all got a lot going on, right? We're not looking for another issue to pay attention to. We're not looking for another problem that we have to put our minds to. Like, that is definitely not the case. It wasn't the case before the pandemic, and it's not the case now. So when folks hear about climate change, when they hear about, the impacts on migration on people, it's like, yeah, unless it's a kitchen table issue right now, unless it's going to impact, my kids getting to school in the morning, unless it's going to impact, this bill that I got to pay, tomorrow when my check comes, I might not have space to engage on it, especially considering what you said, Raina, the way that these issues are often framed about fish and trees and, and other, wildlife. Those are important things to us, especially as Oregonians, and many of us enjoy them and understand and appreciate them. But it's not the same thing as the bill I got to pay tomorrow. It's not the same thing as the dinner I got to put, on the table tonight. And connecting these issues for folks, I think, is super important. So thank you for highlighting that. Jennifer?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great segue to our next question. Jackie, I think you spoke to how this shows up in your work. And I think what I would ask is just to dig a little deeper to see, and if you could speak more deeply about how it's affecting your community and how it's showing up for you all. And I think the same for Raina as well. So folks can get more of that real world framing of how this isn't just some abstract thing that's happening, but this is actually day to day for folks.
Thank you for that question, Jennifer. And, this is a near and dear reality that members of my community have to deal with. So my community, climate change has effects on migration from people from the Micronesian islands, specifically our communities from the Kofa Nations or individuals from the Compact of Free Association, including the Federated States of Micronesia, our Chukis, Pohnpeian, Yapis, Koshrayan communities, our Marshallese community, and even our Palauan communities who have been displaced and who come to Oregon and other local locations here within the states. Often through displacement, we see how one's culture can be lost, as members can feel pressures to assimilate into a new culture to gain acceptance. In addition, diaspora also separates families from one another, creating isolation and loneliness, and even the loss of culture and language. Our community can feel this pressure immediately or within a short months due to the isolation and having to adapt to life here in the States. We're seeing a large number of people from our community coming to the US who, due to slowly their ocean waters rising on their islands, and they're being wiped out from the map in just a few years. At MIC, or again, the Micronesian Islander Community, my organization, it's a nonprofit organization I am proud to work for. I've been involved with this organization for at least the past 10 years. And one of the programs that we have is committed to preserving our culture for generations who will never be able to see the beauty of our native islands. For example, elders and youth from the Kapinga Merengue community is an outer island community from Pohnpei who have worked in partnership with our organization on a language and cultural based program for the past few years. We started with the summer language program in 2018, which have since expanded into a year-long program for the first time, bringing together our youth and adults who want to learn and preserve our culture. We're also in the process of creating a summer program series for other Micronesian community groups. And also to celebrate our community, we host an annual Micronesian Islander Community Cultural Celebration, or MICC, it's a long name, showcasing our culture through song, dance, art, and storytelling. Now, one of our missions is to organize social justice programs, and this includes, preserving our culture, enhancing our leadership opportunities. And for me personally, climate change is a social justice issue, but it's also how are we safeguarding the health of our community and creating opportunities to build. To that end, we bring people together with the focus to help our community, and we look for opportunities to bridge learning opportunities with the proper resources and advocacy. Most importantly, we also advocate on behalf of our community, and how we articulate this from the community perspective. In the past several years, we went from an all-volunteer board to an independent 501c3 now with 9 staff to outreach to community and navigate the system with resources and services. You also have to keep in mind that when it comes to our members of our community, migrants, when they immigrate here to Oregon and to other parts of the US, we all come from a variety of reasons, whether it's educational, employment, healthcare access, and even assisting our families. And this is also what is happening to our Micronesian families, except now we're adding climate change in there, the loss of land to the equation as to reasons why we're coming. More often than not, our community often comes to this country with little or no support, and they need help to fill in that gap. With climate change becoming an increasing concern, we're going to continue to see these disruptions worldwide, as we're seeing a wildfires increasing, flooding, and even the loss of soil and vegetation. You can also see quickly how this interconnectedness occurs within our industries and our ways of life. We're being able to see more migration as communities look for better opportunities for themselves and also for their families. Unless we're willing to commit to immediate and meaningful action, the effects and consequences are going to just get more dire and more urgent.
Thank you so much for that question. And I think it really feeds into the last question that we have for Raina, is just thinking through, what do you think of when you think of intersectional environmentalism, and like, what does that mean to you? And like, how do you see it in your work? I mean, I think it's kind of a new phrase that's out there. It's like everything else that gets hot and people like want to adapt it. But I think it's really key to unpacking some of the issues that we're facing. Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for that question too. And I think on the one hand, we're seeing different places that it's showing up in Oregon where this conversation is actually making a big impact, and we're centering environmental justice at the intersection. And we're seeing that, for example, just in Salem right now, House Bill 4077, the governor has made it a priority to pass a budget, resources for an environmental justice council. And that would actually be able to support impacted communities all across Oregon. But when I think about the intersectionality of it, I think one important event that happened on Monday, I mean, I think of many events, but one event that comes to mind right now is the Monday grassroots action that happened called A Day Without an Immigrant. And that we are having these conversations that are centering community, that are about grassroots organizing, that are saying, look, we need, in order for us to live well or be okay in this environment, we need some basic things to happen. One of those things is that we need immigration reform. We need a pathway to legalization for 11 million undocumented immigrants that are here today. And we need to think about what the future looks like, because from where I'm sitting, we're hearing about labor shortages, we're hearing about the climate crisis, and all of these things don't culminate to less immigrants coming to support our country and coming to get refuge in our country, right? We need a pathway that also looks into the future, that can be just, equitable, environmental justice at the center, human rights at the center, equity at the center, dignity, respect, all of those things, and really hold this tradition of continuing to be a beacon of hope for many people that come here to find a different life or to change their conditions. The other thing that also comes to mind is House Bill 4002. And this is our top priority bill right now at PECUN. And thank you to the Urban League of Portland for supporting us. Thank you to the Micronesian community that's been supporting us too on this. And it would end the exclusion of farm workers from overtime pay. Back in the 30s, you know, the New Deal excluded a very important group of workers. It was farm workers and domestic workers. And really it was because of Southern lawmakers that wanted to exclude a whole workforce of many of them being Black workers. And that legacy has reverberated today. You know, most of the workers now that are in the fields are people who are immigrants from Mexico and Central America, indigenous people from Mexico and Central America that frankly came here because they lost their farms to whether it was climate change or international trade policies that really damaged their ability to make money. And now they're here working for farmers, right? So these things have an impact, and we're trying to make it so that they get time and a half for 40 hours, for working over 40 hours worked. And it would also provide a transitional credit for growers to be able to also be a part of this change. And we have been working really hard to raise awareness around why it's important, because we also know that these same workers, these people who are people like my parents that are being basically exploited when they're working out in the fields, working themselves very hard in very, very difficult conditions, backbreaking work, that same exploitation is reflected in the way that we treat our land. And we see that with water, where there's herbicide levels in the water that are near the agricultural fields, pesticide exposure, where we're seeing long-term impacts of farm workers, especially farm workers who are working with things like chlorpyrifos or paquat, which now we're seeing that many farm workers have Parkinson's disease because of that. And for us, really centering Black and Indigenous people of color, the people on the front lines, is important because we are centering the fact that we're experiencing the impacts of climate change and environmental crisis today. And we're the last ones to get the relief, but the first ones to experience the issues. And we know that just hearing from President Nkenge's stats that in higher income white neighborhoods, this isn't happening. And these disparities are really falling upon racial lines. And when we look at these systems of oppression, we need to center Black and brown communities. As a Latina, as a woman whose family came here undocumented, doing this work in the fields, like for me, being able to address these underlying causes of climate change and the impacts it has on farm workers is crucial. And we have seen that we have hotter days in the summer, colder and colder days in the winter, with an immigrant community that is working in temperatures that are over 100 degrees just this summer. It was really important for us to also advocate for strong protections and rules for workers around heat and smoke. This summer, we actually saw a really tragic story, a preventable death of 38-year-old farm worker, Sebastián Francisco Pérez, who died at the peak of the heat dome on June 28th in St. Paul, Oregon, working in one of the nurseries out there. And the story goes that he was working hard because he wanted to buy a home back in Guatemala and have a baby with his wife. And unfortunately, he never got to fulfill that vision and that dream. But today, what we can do is that we can actually adopt strong protections for these workers. We're really happy that OSHA had some movement to be able to pass emergency rules. And we still have concerns about the way that they can actually enforce those rules. We know that even in that field, in that nursery that Sebastián Francisco Pérez was working at, there was multiple violations to OSHA complaints that never got investigated. And for us now, we're in the permanent rulemaking part of this story. And I'm really excited to say that like now we're on track to having some of the strongest heat and smoke rules in the country. I'm sad to say that it had to come at the cost of someone's life. But I hope that we are able to have these critical protections in place where, people are able to take paid breaks when the temperatures are over 100 degrees, where people are able to have access to cool drinking water, to shade structures, a buddy system when it's getting really hot out there, not to have people go out there on their own. And, if somebody faints out in the fields, you don't know that they're out there, right? That there's a plan, that there's training and protocols for the staff and the supervisors, because we really do believe that when people know better, they do better, and that we can actually prevent another tragedy from happening in the future. There's also some resolutions also in the House. Representative Alonso Leon filed a resolution that could get us on a path to really build a path to getting hazard pay for workers, and to also have very clear instructions when we are at level 3 evacuation instructions. We saw this also happen during the Labor Day wildfires. Workers were calling, they're like, are we supposed to be out here? And we're like, and we called OSHA, there was no protections in place. So wanting to make sure that those things are clear, and that we have a standard for people, and that we protect and value the people that are doing the toughest work, that are keeping America and Oregon fed. So yeah, we encourage you folks who would like to get more involved and to learn more too, to visit pecun.org.
Karina, when, I remember very much, I live in a rural area, and lots of farms and fields, and thus farm workers. I remember when the skies were orange, right? I mean, all the warnings saying inside, don't let your pets outside. And I needed to go to work. And so I hopped in my car and I'm driving, and I could barely make out people in the field who had, bandanas tied around their faces, who were out there working. And I was horrified. I thought to myself, oh no. During this time when they're advising people to stay inside, when the Urban League is trying to find ways to help people who live on the streets to stay safe, and it's during the pandemic and we don't have our normal sort of our emergency shelters and centers where we bring our senior citizens to the Urban League and open our doors just to keep people inside and keep them safe. During that time, we're scrambling on that front. There are people who are on purpose outside of doors working because they have to, because they need to. And the owners of the farms, have their own motivations, of course. Some of that product is going to spoil in the field if they don't, get it off the vine quickly because of the because of the smoke and the heat. Understanding all of that. But my thought was, my goodness, how can it be that I'm supposed to keep my pets inside? I'm supposed to keep all my windows up and my home sealed up tight. And we got folks who were out here working hour after hour, day after day with no more than a piece of cloth tied around their face. This makes no sense. And it doesn't seem like, what I would expect out of my Oregon. But I was able to see that with my own two eyes. And I think about other Oregonians who may not live so close to agricultural areas and who didn't have that moment of seeing their neighbors working under those kinds of conditions. But for me, that was, the brightest of bright red lights to say, whoa, there's more that needs to happen. There's more that I need to learn. Because this is not the way that I want my community to be. It's not the way that I want my neighbors to have to live. It was not surprising because I knew it, but it was shocking to see it, even then. And of course, we know that too many people were impacted during the heat dome, right? We lost many lives in our state. And I don't know what you think. And before we're gonna get to our honorees in just a few minutes. We are, but I think of a few things when I'm thinking about climate change and the impacts. My husband, when we moved back here, he grew up on the East Coast, and when we were moving out here, folks were saying, "Oh, isn't it going to be cold in Oregon? Oh, isn't it going to be all the stories about Oregon weather?" And I'm like, listen, it's warmer where I'm from than it is in New York. All right, it rains less where I'm from than it does in Miami. Leave me alone. I have a lifetime of refuting these weather kind of things, being from here. But of course, we get home and there are massive snowstorms. And then last year, of course, we had a massive ice storm in which we ourselves didn't have power for more than a week. And just the impact around the community with that kind of weather event, and weather and climate are not the same thing. You can, spare me the emails, y'all. I know. And at the same time, it made me plug into the fact of the ways that our climate is changing. We've got folks who are in the field who are working during the smoke and the fire events. We've got firefighters across the state. We have incarcerated people who are fighting fires across the state. As they do that, they find in some places there's not enough water to fight those fires because we've been living under drought conditions season after season, and our snowpack hasn't rebounded in quite some time. We've got all these different factors that are spinning around us in ways that we have to be smart as consumers. We have to be smart as voters to connect those dots, not just to experience it in the moment, to say, wait a second, all these things are very weird. They're very uncommon, and why are they happening? And what's the connection to sort of to the world in which we live, and what can we do to make things be different? Because if this taste that we've gotten in the past, let's just say 5 years, is anything like what's going to happen in the next decade to come, and experts tell us it is, it's shocking and it's really scary. Jackie, I have a quick question for you. I promise, team, I'm going to go to the honorees. I really am. But Jackie, I think I heard you say that part of your work with the Micronesian Islander community is to preserve a culture and history for future generations that they won't be able to see because the islands on which some of that culture and history was created won't exist anymore. Will you just take a minute and a half and talk about that?
Right. So, I mean, when we're talking about our community's culture, these are very small islands with a certain number of people. As that when they're coming out here, not only are we losing the value of their lands and even having access to like their local foods, but then coming here, they're again isolated and most of the time separated from people that they knew from back home. They might have some extended family here. I mean, those would be the lucky ones, but we're also seeing a larger number of people who don't know anybody, who usually have this sense of community, and they're losing that sense of community. So one of the things that my organization is trying to do is to keep our community together for the ones who are here, highlighting our culture, highlighting our languages, highlighting our people, highlighting the accomplishments and respecting the different parts of who make our community. Like we have elders, we have very young people, all from different walks of life, and we want to be able to uplift and celebrate them. But we're not going to be able to, as we're continuing to see them all separate from one another as they're being displaced and coming here.
Thank you for that, Jackie. When you said it, it just sort of made me pause. Like, I mean, it's startling, but it's impressive to hear that you're doing that work for community. I know that we've got a poll question. I promised it. Let's talk about that. Jennifer, will you walk us through so that we know how to engage?
Yeah, there should be a poll question, a series of options that you can choose from. And the question is, how have you been personally impacted by climate change? So you should see a series of options on the screen where you'll be able to select from. We'll also put it in the chat in Facebook, so you can put your response in the chat. And at the end of the event, we will post those results so folks can get a sense of, what folks selected.
Thank you very kindly. Now, y'all, I need you to play a drum roll in your head. Just like get that going in your head. We're all gonna feel it. This is a moment of connectedness. Okay, thank you. Because now we're going to honor our community champions. We want to take a moment tonight to honor groups that are dynamic and impactful right here in the Mid-Valley. And I'm super excited that I get to introduce a colleague of mine, someone whose work I get to watch from near and far, but I don't get to see often enough. The work that he does with youth, with community members, also with elders, is really impressive. I won't say too much because I want him to have a chance to talk about the work as well. But throughout the 90s, this organization and this brother have done the most to bring community together, to create solutions that are, for us, by us, in a way that really leads to lasting change. So here we are in 2022, talking about the impactful organization, and Brother Levy Herrera Lopez, who is the leader at Mano a Mano. Levy, Executive Director, Sir, of Mano a Mano Family Center. Can we get you on camera? There you are, my brother. Hello, hello. Thank you for joining us, and I want to congratulate you on being a community champion. We also want to give you a couple of minutes to talk about the work that you do. But before I do that, I just want to thank you for the impact that you make on community. I want to thank you for your resilience and your willingness to keep pushing and pushing and pushing on behalf of the communities that you serve. We see you and we appreciate you. Levy?
Thank you so much for the kind words and the invitation to this event, and to everyone who's involved in hosting and joining tonight. My name is Levy Herrera Lopez. I'm Executive Director of the Mano a Mano Family Center here in Salem, and I use he, him, his, L pronouns. I want to take a little an opportunity to give you a bit of background about what the Mano a Mano Family Center does. We are the oldest community-based organization in Salem Keizer that is led by Latinos or immigrant people. We were founded in 1988 to support migrant agricultural workers in the area. There's a very interesting story there that we don't have time for tonight, but we were seeing the need for something like Mano a Mano to be established in the area. And now, 3 decades later, we serve about 3,000 families every year through a variety of activities, which includes helping people access concrete supports during a crisis, either a personal crisis or a community crisis like what we're going through right now. We also help with youth mentoring, parenting, and family programs. And although the majority of the families we serve identify as immigrants, Latinos, or Spanish speakers, about 25% identify as non-Latinos. And we think the work that we're doing is going to help us achieve our mission of helping to strengthen families by reducing toxic stress and promoting hope. And one of the things that really impacts toxic stress and that really harms resiliency is social exclusion and systemic oppression. And the systems, really harm people who are already in vulnerable situations. And really, migration is part of our, not just an issue that the families that Mano a Mano serves cares about, but it's also part of our story, the story that we tell each other when we meet and when we get together. And so it's climate change. And I think what we've tried to do, if I could summarize what Mano a Mano has tried to do over the last 3 decades, is to really work with others in the community who have also struggled, and to join with them and learn from each other. And more importantly, I think join our stories into a shared story of overcoming oppression, because that's the end. We can inspire and learn from each other by sharing about our struggles, but really it's about writing a new story of a world that's better than what we have right now, and how we can all achieve it together. And it's not for one or the other, but really for all of us. And whenever I say that, I always hear a voice in the background in saying, well, that's really a utopia, that's not going to happen. But if we don't set that goal, if we don't think that way, it's definitely never going to happen. And so I'm honored for being in this conversation, and thank you for the time. And thank you.
Brother Levy, thank you so much. Reducing toxic stress and promoting hope. My goodness, you didn't choose hard work at all. Thank you for sharing with us this evening. Will you also tell us if folks want to get involved or want to support Mano a Mano, if we want to send donations, how do we do that?
We are getting much better at using social media. So we have, you can find us either as Mano a Mano or Mano a Mano Family Center on Facebook, and I'll try to put the links in somewhere to get it to people who are watching. But yeah, we're here in Salem, and we've got a couple locations that people can find us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Levy. We really appreciate having you here. We're going to move on to our next honoree this evening. I see you there, Alex. Thanks. Y'all, Latinos Unidos Siempre, LUS, is a local organization that came together under the coordination of sponsors Marta Calderon and Roberto Barza to fight against immigration rates, a high dropout rate, and sort of antisocial behavior amongst youth. So, I hate to say gang activity because too often youth are tagged as being gang members when actually what they are is disaffected and needing something to do. And when you're Black and you're brown and you hang out with your friends downtown, folks are pretty quick to call you a gang member when what you are is bored. But this organization responded to the need in the community when they saw that children were being labeled inappropriately. They also came together to fight for anti-immigrant policies that were before the state legislature at that time. That's the roots of LUS, and it quickly became the youth arm of Mano a Mano Family Center. So we're going to hear a little bit more about this organization now that you've heard something about the parent organization. So Alex Sosa is here tonight representing LUS. And Alex, thank you so much for being here. We are delighted to honor you and the organization as one of our community champions. If you would please tell us a little bit about the organization.
Yeah, can y'all hear me? All right. So my name is Alex. I'm an organizer at LUS, and I was an organizer since I was 13, and now I'm 17. The prison industrial complex has done so much damage, not only like locally, but nationwide. It's brutally impacted communities. It's caused intergenerational trauma, and it has affected generations and generations to come. Let that sink in. Like, it's pretty scary to think about. I can say as a kid, if this oppressive institution did not exist, my life would be very different. If we had systems that focused on restorative justice, healing, rather than punishment and oppression, the world would be different for sure. I'm a prison abolitionist. As someone who's directly impacted by the school to prison and deportation pipeline, and has loved ones affected by the system, I want to say thank you for the recognition of LUS's work, and because the work we do as a grassroots organization is very important. LUS was founded by it was founded by youth. It was founded and always been youth led. In 1996, Latinx youth got together to create LUS to organize and combat institutionalized criminalization of Black and brown youth faced while being racially profiled and continue to face due to racist systems and systematic policing. In the 25 years that LUS has existed, it's managed to grow as an organization to empower youth through leadership developments and self-advocacy. In 2021, after organizing nonstop during a pandemic And after years of resisting the school to prison and deportation pipeline, we got cops out of our schools. And I'll give that a moment. This is a huge and symbolic win for the Black and Brown youth, and very necessary step to continue to advocate for the complete abolition of the school to prison deportation pipeline. And organizing is very important to recognize when you put youth directly impacted in the forefront of the fight, who do not compromise with neoliberal power structures, you win. It's always, and as always, continue to self-advocate for the support of Black and Brown youth deserve within their schools. And it's important to reimagine and to recognize that we must dismantle white supremacist systems. And I want to say one more thing, to keep going, I think, working within a pandemic, we all seem to find out there's always a dropping point, but just remember, si se puede.
Alex, thank you so much for being here. You gave me chills listening to your comments. And the fact that you are a teen and you started as a younger teen is really exciting to me. And I will tell you that I was an organizer as a youth too. And people would tell me back then, oh, when you're older, you'll understand, things that I'm older now and I still don't understand why our systems have to be unjust. So I encourage you to persist in doing what you're doing. And know that you have given me great energy, and I certainly appreciate you and Luz. Levy, I appreciate you as well, and Mano a Mano Family Center. You are an important part of our community, and I value your work even when I'm not around to say so, brother. Thank you both very much for being with us tonight. Before you go, Alex, how can folks support Luz? How can folks get involved? Just let us know how we can follow your work and all of that.
Yeah, so there's many of ways. We have Facebook. We also have Instagram. Our Instagram is @LuzYouth. So it's basically @LUS Youth. And then our Facebook is Latinos Unidos Siempre. You can find us on there. You can always message us. We're always keeping up to date with our social media, posting new things about school board meetings that are very important to the work we do. And also just some general information about education and stuff like that. And that's how you can contact us or to see what we are up to.
That's great. Thank you so much to both of you. Jennifer, I know I've pushed things beyond the time that I was supposed to, but we're still going to take questions. We won't take a ton, but I hope that staff is interacting in the comments so we can engage with people that way. And I may even be able to jump on social a little later so we can interact with folks. But Raina and Jackie, if you'll hang with me for a few more minutes, I think Jennifer has a couple of questions that we can take from participants, from the audience.
Absolutely. We've touched on this several times throughout the evening, but I just want to do a full circle moment and really bring it back to why we're here this evening and ask the question to the panel. Why do you believe it's important for our communities to care about the intersections of migration and climate change? And we can start with President Harmon Johnson.
I was reaching for my mute button. I couldn't find it. Sorry. My unmute button rather. I think we've heard really good examples tonight of why it's important for us to think about and to talk about these issues and why we have to do so in an intersectional manner. Whether you're Micronesian, whether you're a Central American immigrant working here in the Mid-Valley, or whether you live in an urban area, the impacts of climate change have been discussed tonight, and they're clear on our health, on our wellness, on our futures, and on the way that we shape the community in which we live. If we think about just being selfish, if we think about our health and the quality of the air that we breathe, if we think about our future and the places that we're able to live and do business that are impacted by wildfire, that are impacted by low snowpack and a lack of water, and which would obviously impact agriculture and the ability to grow our own food and other resources that Oregonians are able to sell for profit. And if we think about the cultural impacts and the familial impacts, I think it becomes clear why issues of climate change are important to all of us. I do, though, want to challenge everyone who's with us this evening to think about examples from your own lives and how they relate to climate change. What have you experienced in your own family? What have you experienced in your own workplace that you can draw a line to say, oh, yeah, this does relate to climate change? Because in so doing, I think it will help you, like it helps me, to have something in my head that points me in the direction of learning more, but also being better engaged when the issues come before the legislature or even before my local city council. Raina?
Yeah, this is I mean, I really love this question because I think it gets right to the center of it. And I think for me, it's like just the basics, right? Do you eat? Well, you should care about climate and migration because those farm workers that are making sure that you have the food every day on your table, they are here because of migration and now the impacts of climate. Do you own a business or do you like to shop at a local business? We've seen report after report that shows that immigrants have been they're a net contributor of our economy and that they have been a really powerful center of growth for our economies. And you know, it's no longer like back in the day. I remember when all those anti-immigrant groups were trying to say that, you know, we didn't pay taxes and all kinds of things. Well, we pay a lot of taxes, actually, millions and billions of dollars in taxes, by the way. Do you like clean air? Do you like to drink water? All of these things are so connected. And I mean, and let's talk about our stories. Do you know someone with cancer? Do you know someone with Parkinson's disease? I mean, all of these things are connected to our environment. I'm not saying that for sure your grandma or your friend or yourself may have it because of that, but there's many correlations to that, and unfortunately, we're having to. It takes years to see whether it comes from those things or not. But you know, we're seeing those things today from farm workers that had been out in the fields for many years and interacting with these chemicals. So you know, those are just some basic questions, but that's why I like this question because it was getting down to the basics.
Jackie, anything you want to add?
Yes, so Reina, thank you again for sharing, and Kingi as well for you know your experiences as well as what you see within the community. And when we're talking about the Micronesian community, like you know, in terms of how it was founded, specifically under the COFA Compact, one of the things to take in consideration is one of the reasons why the COFA Compact is also in existence is because of when the U.S. you know, took over the territories, and the main idea behind the territories was for them to have strategic military placement at the expense of utilizing their islands. And many years ago, not too long ago, it feels like, the U.S. government tested you know bombings onto some of the rural parts of the Marshall Islands. And at that time, they thought, oh, we could just relocate people from these islands and they would be fine. But they didn't take in consideration after they did the testing, how far and wide it spread. It not only obliterated the ability for them to live on their island, taking away their way of life, but for the people who end up getting relocated on the other island, they didn't have access to the same soil or to even the same land. So the food that they used to grow, it was hard for them to grow. That was first and foremost. Second, the spread of the radiation, the fallout, it spread beyond what the US government said was going to happen. So a large number of these individuals, they were exposed to this high levels of radiation, more than what happened in Hiroshima, more than what happened in Nagasaki. And all these individuals, they had long-term health impacts. And we're seeing all these cancers that were never there before. And we were seeing a large number of women who were giving birth to what they call jelly babies, because pretty much when the baby was born, there was nothing left of them. And we're seeing a large number of cancers that have never existed within this community before. And the long-term impact now is a lot number of these people, when they're coming here to the US trying to get healthcare, now we're seeing generational impact. A large number of their children, their children's children, whose DNA has now been forever altered. And now they're dealing with health impacts and health conditions that were never seen before. So when we're talking about climate, we're talking also about the impact, anything that we do as people or as communities or as government entities, that long-term impact that it has on members of our community and what it looks like for future generations.
Thank you, Jackie. I think I know we have questions from the audience, and Jennifer, we're going to take one before we have to wrap up. So if you would please pick one out of the hat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a good transition into this question. And the question is, will there be a push to develop hazard pay for frontline workers? And let's
That's a
start
good
with
one.
Raina.
Yeah, there is a push right now for hazard pay for workers. And so and I mentioned it really, really briefly, what's happening with that, but the resolution that I was talking about that Representative Alonso Leon has been pushing is actually would create a relief fund, a hazard pay relief fund for workers who are outside. And I think that that would be a really important game changer for folks that are working in hazardous conditions and are needing, especially if there's like a level 3 evacuation, that they can have a little bit of peace of mind to take off that day so that they don't lose wages. The other thing that's been happening too was that there was a essential worker pay coalition that was meeting around a pretty significant investment from the state that has actually been trying to find a home to be able to distribute this money, but but I'm not really sure actually where it is in the legislature. But this one would be for all workers who are essential, not just outdoor workers, and it would provide an additional pay for folks who are working in all kinds of hazardous conditions, not just evacuation level wildfires and extreme heat. So there's a lot of support for it, and I think it's possible. But I think the biggest thing that is a challenge is what's the home for it? Because we saw what happened with unemployment, right? When there was a big pressure on the agency to be able to deliver this money, and it was really difficult. So there is an infrastructure need there. We have things like the Oregon Worker Relief Fund that has been able to distribute over $100 million for alternative stimulus supports for undocumented workers. But I think we do need something that can really accommodate something even bigger, like essential worker pay for folks who are working in hazardous conditions right now beyond just climate. But those are the two big things that I know about that are coming through the pipeline.
Raina, thank you. I want to thank you for being here tonight, for making time on vacation this evening, for trying something new with me. Jackie, I want to thank you for the same. I know that you've got family responsibilities, you've got studying to do, you've got work to do, all the things, and you still made time to engage with me, but to engage with the broader community. And I just want to appreciate you for doing so. All the folks who have joined us this evening, whether you are on YouTube or you are on Facebook, or for those of you who are watching this on playback on some platform or other, also want to thank you for being here tonight for this Urban League community conversation. All of us is an ongoing theme that you will continue to see from the Urban League, and in partnership with community leaders and organizations all around the state, because we mean it when we say Oregon belongs to all of us. And we will continue to show up in places and in ways, holding discussions about the issues that we care about most, and issues that perhaps we should care about more. That's what this is all about for us. Thank you for joining us this evening. If you want to learn more about the Urban League, we are at ulpdx.org, ulpdx.org. You can find us on the socials at ulpdx or the Urban League of Portland on Facebook. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.